The sixth country was Israel, who is the only nation in the world to never actually acknowledge possessing nuclear weapons and have never declared they exist, so nobody knows exactly when or how many were created, but lots of details have leaked. As mentioned, the Israelis were working with the French since the 50s on nuclear energy, and France helped Israel build a secret nuclear facility in the Negev desert, which became a problem in 1963 as US President Kennedy became concerned the Israelis were developing nuclear weapons. JFK was strongly opposed to this and demanded the US be allowed to inspect the facility to ensure it was being used for energy and not bombs. Israel repeatedly denied and delayed the US demands, only allowing careful, staged inspections while concealing hidden underground facilities that were later revealed to be creating weapons. Israeli Prime Minister and founder David Ben-Gurion was reportedly obsessed with obtaining nuclear weapons, and it created a rift with the United States, who weren't close allies at the time. This cooled off as JFK's successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, was much less aggressive on preventing Israel's nuclear weapons program, which is believed to have been completed around 1967. While Israel's nuclear capabilities had been rumored and speculated all throughout the 60s, the big revelation came later in 1986. Mordecai Vanunu, an Israeli technician who worked at that Negev nuclear research center, fled Israel and leaked to the British press a massive amount of photos he took personally and documents detailing what the facility was really being used for. He was then kidnapped by Israel's Mossad in Rome after being lured there by a female Mossad agent he believed he was going on a date with. He was then sedated and brought back to Israel, where he was sentenced to 18 years in prison for espionage and treason in a behind closed doors trial. He's currently under significant restrictions to his speech and travel and has been rearrested many times for parole violations, speaking to the press and attempting to leave Israel. It's also believed from his leaks that Israel has developed thermonuclear weapons. The eighth country to develop nuclear weapons was South Africa, which is one of the most unique stories. It possessed one of the world's largest reserves of natural uranium, which is a key ingredient, and had been supplying it to the US, UK, France, and potentially the Soviet Union and Israel, most of which was intended for peaceful energy reactors, but it's likely some also ended up being used for weapons. Since 1948, South Africa had created a nuclear energy program, but by the 1960s and 70s, they shifted interest into weapons due to the increased Soviet influence that was spreading in Namibia and Angola. As well as this, the apartheid regime drew worldwide condemnation, causing South Africa to become politically isolated and without many allies for protection. In 1977, they created a testing facility in its Kalahari desert and nearly detonated a bomb, but when a Soviet satellite spotted it and reported this to the US, the backlash and international pressure stopped the test. In 1979, US satellites detected a double flash of light in the Prince Edward Islands controlled by South Africa in the Indian Ocean. This was called the Vela incident and is widely believed to have been a joint nuclear test by Israel in collaboration with South Africa. They likely allowed Israel to test its weapons there in exchange for South Africa gaining some of this research for its own program, who didn't have functional weapons yet at the time. By the mid-1980s, it had created 6 nuclear bombs, roughly the size of the one dropped on Hiroshima, and it's believed to have achieved this with the help of Israel, likely in exchange for its large uranium supplies. South Africa maintained deliberate ambiguity around its weapons, never admitting to having nukes, similar to Israel, to act as a deterrent from hostile nations. But by the 90s, as the Soviet Union collapsed, its need for protection from communist threats dissipated, and with the apartheid regime coming to an end, it feared handing over nuclear weapons to the next incoming government, so it opted to be the first nation in history to dismantle and dispose of its nukes, and then admitted to the world that it had actually possessed them. The designs were destroyed and the enriched uranium was locked in a nuclear facility vault, although in 2007 armed intruders breached the facility and came close to stealing the materials before being stopped, and there are still fears today about this weaponized uranium falling into the wrong hands.